Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I've got an interesting author and a tough book or at least a tough topic to introduce you tonight. Donna Besel is my guest. She is an author of a memoir, a staggering memoir, frankly, called The Unraveling: Incest and the Destruction of a Family. Incest and the Destruction of a Family. Donna Besel, welcome to the show. Why did you write a book about such a difficult topic?
Well, there are several reasons. First of all, my main reason, and I tell people this all the time, I wanted to make it okay to talk about this topic because it is probably one of the most taboo subjects of all the taboo subjects. And it's like I sort of grew to understand that this is one of the few crimes that people can't talk about. That the shame and the blame goes to the victims, especially if they're childhood victims. So, and that's what keeps it a secret, because the offenders, the perpetrators, they are the ones who manipulate that fear of being outed, or whatever you want to call it. And even when you get into the court system, right away they slap a publication ban, and so it becomes this big secret
to protect the victim. Typically, no.
Yes, but it's like you wouldn't do that if somebody stole your car. You wouldn't want, I got to be protected. I got to be protected. You know what I'm saying? It's a weird crime that the victim.
You said before we started that if you couldn't find a book about a topic, you were forced to write a book about the topic. Is that one of the reasons why you wrote it?
Yes, because there are books about abuse and childhood abuse, but there aren't books about what happens when the offender is charged. And I don't know, did you read some of the book, or did you?
I was given excerpts of it, yes.
Yes. Okay, my father was charged and convicted after 3.5 years. So we experienced that as adults, and yeah, it was, it's
he was convicted in 1993.
Yes, he was charged in 1993, and he finally was convicted in 1995. It started
and you were an adult by then?
Oh yeah, I was in my 40s. The thing was, we found out, like, my mother died when I was 14, and my father remarried like 4 years later, I think, after. And he had a younger wife who had no children, but she adopted a daughter. And we found out it was happening with this adopted daughter. So we were like, what are we going to do? Are we going to keep not talking about this thing? And also we found out that it had gone into, like, a niece like was experiencing it. Then recently I just found out that same, like, my brother-in-law was molesting not only the niece but one of the nephews too. So it was kind of the question that my niece raised was, why don't you do something? Like, talking to her mom, and all of my aunts have been abused. Why isn't anybody doing anything? And that sort of set everything in motion.
So this did not happen to you when you were a child?
It did. Yes, it happened to me and all of my sisters.
You and all of your sisters, and then it happened again to
my adopted sister, that we found out because I was quite a bit older than her.
And so was your mother aware of what was going on?
I'm not really sure, because she died so young, and she had 10 kids, and she was very busy. So yeah, she knew that my father was violent, and she knew that he was a sexual predator of older women, but I don't know if she realized what was going on with all the daughters. So she probably did.
And so this happened to you and your sisters, to your
Yes.
adopted sister, a decade or more later, when he remarried, and you were in your 40s, to a niece of yours.
Yes.
Why were people quiet for so long?
Well, if you know anything about incest, it's something people don't like to talk about. I was just talking about it. It's one of the strongest taboos there is. Like, I know so many people come up to me and they say, well, I read your book. You know what happened to me? And have you told anybody? No.
It's interesting. I've spoken to some people. I've read a couple books on this topic. I've interviewed someone about it who's written another book on incest previously. And it's often the case that people don't do something about it when it's themselves, but when they see it happening again to someone else, they
Yes.
think, I could have stopped it. I've got to stop it. And
Yes.
if I didn't stop it for myself, I've got to stop it for someone else. Is that part of it?
Well, that was what was happening, because it was happening to my younger sister, my adopted sister. And then it was happening, we found out that my niece, and that sort of happened kind of almost at the same time, because it came out. And then, my people were saying, well, why don't you, me and my sisters, why aren't we doing something about it? And it's because, yeah, it's hard. It's very, very difficult.
How did you
I had
deal with how'd you deal with the charging, with the sentencing, with the evidence that needed to be provided?
Well, after he was charged, like he was charged at my, like, it came out at my sister's wedding in the summer of 1992, and the police started investigating. So they were interviewing us during that fall of 1992, and then they charged him like right after Christmas. So they were interviewing all 10 of in my family, my 10 siblings, and then he was charged early in 1993.
How did it come out at your sister's wedding?
Well, just the fact that more of us found out that it was happening to our adopted sister.
Now, when you were a child and it was happening to you, did you know it was happening to your sisters? Did you all talk about it?
No, we didn't talk about it, but we saw it. With, he was jumping on people we'd be in bed, and he would, like, with so many kids, you're often sleeping like a few in the bed. So he would jump on the bed and be groping and grabbing in people. So, yeah.
And did you try to stop it then?
Yes, I did. I got punched lots.
Because you were trying to stop it with yourself or trying to stop it with some of your sisters?
Both, yes. And also he was very violent with our mother. So, but yes. So
how does someone be so violent sexually and otherwise with people for such a long period of time? Did neighbors not see it? Relatives not see it? Did the community not see it? Did they do anything about it? Or
they saw things, and then, when it came out, people were saying, well, we knew there was something. But you got to remember, I was born in 1954. So it was like the times were different. Like, people, in a small community, people were, oh, well, like, I had lots of women who were friends of my mother's saying, we knew something was going on, but we didn't feel it was our business to get involved. So
they didn't feel it was their business to get involved.
yes.
So they sort of allowed things that took place behind a house door to continue.
More or less, but that was the standard. And surprisingly, it's not, things haven't changed that much. Like, when this book came out, I had thousands of women contacting me saying, it happened to me. I haven't told my mother. It happened to me. I don't talk to my father. It happened to me. I still go to home for Christmas, and I feel sick when I see my father. Like, it's a very strong stigma. It takes a lot of therapy to get through it, like, to get to the other side. Like, I still vividly remember when the prosecuting attorney said, well, your father has to pay for these crimes. And I'm like, crimes? These are crimes. Like, it was like mind-blowing that she was calling it, this is a crime. Like, you just think it's not normal, but it's just something that you have to live with if that makes any sense. Does it make any sense?
It
And
makes
it's
sense.
not unusual because, you know, it happens. An amazing number of people in the population have been abused. Like it's what, 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 5 boys, or whatever. Like if you look at the numbers even today, and out of those thousands, you'll probably get maybe 100 that disclose.
We're chatting with author Donna Besel tonight. She's an author of a memoir called The Unraveling: Incest and the Destruction of a Family. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be back in 2 minutes where we'll delve more into this memoir and this topic and try to understand why it is so prevalent in our society. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I'm chatting tonight with author Donna Besel. As she has written really quite a very difficult, but I think well worth reading memoir, a staggering memoir called The Unraveling: Incest and the Destruction of a Family. Donna, why The Unraveling? Why do you call it The Unraveling?
Well, the publishers chose that. I did start at the beginning. I did say what I told you earlier about how it all came out at my sister's wedding. I did use that word somewhere in the first part, like I said, and then the unraveling began. Because what happened is that the family, as often happens when incest is disclosed or sexual abuse is disclosed, there's the people who want to do something about it. There's the people who don't want to do anything about it because it's going to be very messy and ruin relationships, and relationships maybe get the police involved. And then there's the people in the middle who don't know what to do. They're scared. Like in my case, my siblings were afraid of our father. So they sort of waffle in the middle and they kind of go back and forth. And that happens in church communities. It happens in, you know, teams. It happens in families. It happens in like all over. You know, there's people, you know, all these celebrity revelations. A lot of them say, oh no, he would never do that. You know, like Michael Jackson or Bill Crosby or whatever. Like there's the people that are, you know, sort of believe it. The ones that don't, they may believe it, but they don't want to do anything. They want to keep, you know, protecting, supporting the person.
Your title says it destroys the family. Did it destroy your family?
More or less, but unfortunately, like 3 of my sisters did make statements, and we did go through the court process. You know, so there are 4 of us, and yeah, it sort of split the family. So the family was split. There was the ones who didn't want to do anything, and one sister was very hostile. And then my father died. And also my husband died because he had a similar history. And he died by suicide. And he watched what went on in my family, and it totally messed him up. So yeah, it destroyed people. Destroyed me.
After the conviction, did your sister that opposed it stay opposed, or did she understand it and agree with it after the conviction?
She never. I phoned her like right before his trial was supposed to start, and she swore at me and told me she was going to report me to the police for harassing her. Because I said, you know, this is your last chance to say something. She has since died. She died not long after. So,
and yet she was abused and didn't want it to come out.
Right.
Because
it's a super strong secret.
Because why didn't she want it to come out? Because she didn't want the embarrassment for herself, or she didn't want her father to answer for his crimes?
Partly hers. I don't know. She never really talked about it. We had some family meetings, but here's the thing. Once he was charged, we were told not to talk to each other, because we would in a court case, you can't influence the other witnesses, and we were all witnesses, so we had a couple of therapy like meetings with the ones who wanted to talk about it there with the two counselors. And then once he was charged, we couldn't do that anymore because, yeah, we would be seen to be corroborating and, conspiring to put him in jail. So that sort of wrecked the talking about it and, and supporting each other. We couldn't discuss the details.
He was convicted in 1995, and you wrote this book almost 30 years later.
Oh, well, I didn't. No, actually, I didn't write it 3 years later. That's this will give you some idea of how hard it was to get this book published. I started writing it. I had been advised by my counselor to take notes while it was going on, like a sort of a journal, a therapy journal things. So I was all the sessions I had with therapy, all of the legal things that happened, like it was delayed 26 times. So I was writing that all down. So what I had all these binders full of information that I was writing, like today I went to see, my counselor. Today I went to the support group. Today we went to court, blah, blah, blah. So that was all written down. So a couple of years later, I said, okay, I'm going to write a book about all this because I can't find a book that tells about this thing that we went through. So I wrote it like probably 1996 or 1997. And after my husband died, it was like, yes, this is even more important to tell about this because he didn't want to talk about it in his own family. So it was like, this is really, really important that people know about these things and don't feel that they can't talk about them. So I wrote it in the late 90s, I guess.
But it took 20 years to get it published.
More or less. I had sent it out like back, I guess. I won a prize. I don't know if you're familiar. There's like literary journals that are out there. And I won a prize. And I said, okay, my writing is good enough because I wasn't sure that my writing was good enough. Like, are you familiar with Prairie Fire? A literary journal? Yes. Okay, I won second place, right? So
congratulations.
Big deal. And that was 2002. So I'm like, okay, the writing is good enough. And so I started sending it out and I got rejection. I got very, some of the nice notes, like this is an important subject. This needs to be published, but nobody would publish it.
Has your adopted sister read it?
Okay, yeah, that was one thing I was going to mention. When I first wrote it, I gave it to anybody in the family that wanted. I gave copies, like just, paper, like photocopies to people in my family if they wanted to read it. But I don't think they thought that it would get published. So then in early 2000s, I started sending it out. And I got lots of rejections, like dozens. And then I sort of put it aside for quite a few years, but my writing was getting more and more recognized. So then I thought I would, in 2000 and I don't know, 20, I guess, around that time, earlier maybe, I started sending it out again. Oh, and I went to a creative nonfiction conference and they had a first page thing, like, this is the best first page competition kind of. And there was a very well-known editor with HarperCollins, and he said, this is the best first page, because I don't know if you've seen the first pages. Oh, yes.
That's great. Congratulations. That's impressive. What did your family members that you sent the book to think of it?
Well, they said, oh, yeah, that's true. It's all true. Yeah. And some of them were really, glad that I've written it all down, but they would.
Did some of them say, don't you dare publish it?
Nobody said that.
You talked about your husband. Why would you be attracted to and marry someone that was similar to your father?
Well, I'm not saying it was similar to my father, but he had it in his family. There was abuse. So.
Oh, so I apologize. I had interpreted that he was also an abuser. You're not saying he was.
No, I had a similar family history. And, I'm taking a risk even saying that to you because they are very, in denial. Yes. Although when I was going through the court case, they weren't in denial. They were saying, oh, this happened. They, in his family, they're admitting it. So,
And you
but
said a brother-in-law was also?
sorry,
You
no,
mentioned a brother-in-law as well.
that was had been abuser. Yes. And he actually went through the court system. He was charged.
And related to your father, or related to your husband, or?
No, he married my sister. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Because one of the things that often happens is that people that are abused end up sort of repeating the cycle over again.
Yes.
So I was wondering whether that had happened in your situation. It sounds like it didn't, but may have in your sister's case.
Yes, and like it was happening. And my husband was worried. Well, his family was worried that somehow I could get their father arrested, but that's like I wasn't the victim. I couldn't go to the police and say anything. So it's it's so they were going after him to divorce me because of that. Like he was supportive, but then they sort of panicked.
Sorry. So they were supportive. He was supportive of you and your case against your father, and also the writing of the book. But your
Yes.
husband's family members were concerned that you might influence him to go after somebody else. I presume his father, and say something. So they actually were encouraging him to divorce you.
Yes. That's a whole other story too. Like,
But it sounds like it's the same story, because it sounds like it's people trying to
silence.
silence the victims, and
Yes.
silence people that want to out the victims.
And that was very familiar to me because I had been silenced many times.
So tell me, as you've thought about your own situation and about lots of other situations like this, whether it be your brother-in-law situation or your husband's family situation, or you've mentioned a couple of celebrities, why is there this culture of silence, this culture of denial, this culture of shaming the victim, rather than treating it like the way the prosecutor you mentioned treated it, like a crime?
That's a very good question. I think part of the problem is that people want to believe in happy families, and and also there's this feeling that the stranger danger, like it happens, the person hanging around the school jumping on kids, and that's a myth. Like 80% of childhood sexual assaults are people they know, and probably half of them are people in their own family.
80% of childhood sexual abuse is from people they know. And you
Yes.
think that half of that is from people within their own family.
Yes. I don't. Is
Why?
that what?
Why?
Well, because the children are available and they're under that person's power. So, and they also, they say things like, well, don't tell your mother, if you had tell your mother. This happened to a friend of mine. I found out her daughters were being abused by a guy she had married, or like another marriage. And she said to me, well, what do I do? And I said, well, you go to the police. And he's like, well, if you do that, I'll kill myself. And he did, because he was charged. And so there's this huge shame around it. Like I'm sure you're familiar about the woman in France who came forward, and her husband was, like loaning her out and to be raped. And are you familiar with that story?
Yes, it's
Yes.
impossible in the last year to not be.
Yes. So she had no idea that was going on because he was drugging her. And so she was out of it. And everybody was making, oh, she's such a hero. She's such a hero, because she allowed her name to come. And she said this thing, shift the blame, like flip the blame. And that was a big thing. That was a big deal to say that it wasn't her that should feel the shame of it. It was the guy who was arranging all of those rapes. So, And it's so hard to shift the shame because it happens. And somebody was saying, it happened, especially when you're a child, because you're have this idea that your parent is going to protect you. And the natural feeling of a parent would be to protect someone or something that was, like going after, if you found out, someone was trying to rape your kid, you'd try to kill them probably, right?
Yes.
Or beat them, right? Or if a
Yes.
dog came at your kid, you'd go after the dog, right?
Yes.
So there's something that happens when a child realizes that their parents can't be relied on. So it's a brain thing too. Like they have to abandon that idea that so this person is no longer your real parent.
Do you
Like,
hate your father?
well, he died. So it was like, I didn't go to the funeral, and it was like, it was like, you must be sad, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, because I mourned my father when I was a kid, because I no longer, in my opinion, had a father. I had this person that was there who was trying to molest me all the time, if that makes any sense.
And your sisters. It's
And my
an
sisters.
unbelievable story. We've got to take a break though, and we're going to
Okay.
come back, and I'm going to ask you a little bit more about this whole situation and why it happens and why it continues to happen. Because it really is something that I think your book and you're correctly pointed out. I think this story in France was helpful in making us all far more aware of what's going on, and that we've got to make a stop to it. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We're chatting with Donna Besel tonight about her book, which is about incest, and it's a personal memoir. It's called The Unraveling: Incest and the Destruction of a Family. Donna, this family of yours was destroyed, you say. There was disputes within the family members about whether you should go forward or not. Obviously, people passed away, people committed suicide, lots of people that may have wanted to have kept things quiet had their lives, their abuse publicized. Today, do you think this was all worth it? The conviction, the sentencing, the publication of the book?
Well, it was worth it for my kids to know this, because it was like, okay, this stops here. That was worth it, because it was a big deal for them to lose a father. That was worth it.
Yeah.
I think it's worth it because I hear so many people saying, well, no, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. But they don't realize that the average offender sexually assaults at around 300 people.
What?
Yes.
Seriously? 300 people?
That's the figures I've read.
So, they may start with the family, or it may happen in the family, but it obviously goes a lot wider than that.
A coach or a priest or, whatever. Like, yes, they see people who are vulnerable that can be taken under their power. They can groom them, and then they start grooming them. And then in the family, it's easier because you're with them all the time. So, and people, they think, oh, it's it's a sexual thing. It's not really a sexual thing. It's a weird power thing. Do you want me to show you the cover?
Yes, please. It's a very powerful cover.
Yes.
Is that a picture of him?
No, but the artistic director or person who designed the cover just took something that was appropriate to his age. So
you say that you won some recognition for the first page. Would you mind reading the first page for us?
Sure. Okay. Prologue. Call me incested. I earned that name. I struggled long and hard to be able to say those words. I cannot speak for husbands, children, sisters, brothers, cousins, wives, ancestors, friends, or any of the hundreds involved. I speak only for myself. I tell this story from my vantage point, my version of vision, my fractured reality. She's lying. She's always been crazy and angry. What in hell is she trying to do? To that I say, this is my story. I earned it. I will call myself incested. So that's the first page.
People called you crazy? People called you angry?
Oh, yes, they still do. The lawyers did it. There's that nuts or sluts, you know about that? Nuts or sluts?
No, tell me about that.
Okay, whenever you're in a sexual assault, like when you report it, the defense of the person who's been charged or is going to be charged, they use those two avenues. So the person who is reporting is either nuts or they're sluts. So if they're sluts, it's, well, oh, they want sex all the time, or they're using sex to get money, or it's a, you know, there's nymphomaniacs or whatever. Or you're nuts. That means you have mental health issues. You can't be believed. Yes, in my case, it was when I first went before a judge and, you know, under oath, it was like the defense attorney was, how many children do you have? I have 2 children. What are their names? Blah, blah, blah. And how long did you have postpartum depression? And it was like, I never had postpartum depression. So it was like right away going down that avenue of
Of your nuts.
That I was nuts, or I had mental illness, and I still had mental. And we were accused, the sisters that came forward, that we were conspiring to kill our father. And that was another interesting, well, not interesting, but unprecedented thing about when he was charged. He was older, and we had, as I told you before, we weren't spurred to action until the youngest one was, you know, harmed. And everybody's like, oh, he's too old, he won't do it. So that was not true. But then when he was charged, it was, oh, if he has to go into a courtroom, he's going to die of a heart attack. And that was the first time that defense was used in Manitoba court, because it was like, oh, it'll kill him. They had a SWAT team of cardiologists saying that it would kill him to go into a courtroom.
And what was the response to that defense?
Well, because it took so long, we had the first judge said he was malingering, which I thought was a really great word, because he was drawing it out. And then it was like the longer they stretched it out, oh, he's getting worse, he's getting worse. And, you know, so it was just like nobody really said he didn't do it, which was kind of interesting. But there were so many people that said he did. Like if it was just me, they might have gotten away with that. But it was like, oh, he can't go in, he can't, you know, because it would be cruel and unusual punishment for him to die. So that was the defense's tactic. And then they said we were trying to murder him. Like, unfortunately, not unfortunately, but strangely enough, when we had the preliminary hearing, he was out deer hunting. And he was like, oh, I can't go to court, I'm too sick. But he was deer hunting.
But he was deer hunting. When you had this unraveling at the wedding of one of your sisters, do you describe that in the book?
Yeah, briefly. You know, and even the word, like the publishers picked that title, Incest and the Destruction of a Family. And I wouldn't have really, because it doesn't talk too much about the actual incest. It talks more about what happens after a father is charged and all of the court things and the emotional things that the family sort of goes through. And that's kind of the destruction part. So does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does.
Yeah.
Is there a part about the unraveling that makes sense to read?
Well, I would like to read what I got after he was charged. And he did, to everyone's surprise, sort of send me an apology.
Oh,
So
really?
I'll just read that a little bit. In all the years I could remember, Jock had never written to me, but on September 10th, pardon me, this was before he was charged. It was when everything burst out. I opened our mailbox and saw he had written a note. Dear Donna, I'm writing to ask your forgiveness for any harm I have caused you and hope we will be able to see you and your children who we miss not seeing. I have many regrets. Your father, Jock. Now you notice it's quite vague about what exactly is going on. Like he says, for any harm. And then he says, we miss, I have many regrets. Like he never really says what he did. So your father, Jock. And what really bothered me when he said, I miss seeing your children, because I had a daughter, right? So I have a daughter.
So
That was,
I come back to this unraveling, if you could describe it. So you're at your sister's wedding.
yes.
And it came out that he was abusing your adopted sister.
Yes.
How did it come out? It just like casual conversation around the bar?
She had started telling people. She had started telling teachers and telling other siblings that were more closer in age to her. And also, and then it was like, oh, we were stupid. Like I could read some of that part.
Yes.
Yeah.
And tell me while you're looking for it, this is your stepmother. How did your stepmother respond?
She supported and protected him, and which was really strange because she was doing work as a social worker and she had adopted this child when it was a case where that she was dealing with as a professional.
And yet she supported him.
Yep. And then once again, even if you think about Alice Munro, when everybody was, oh, Alice Munro, why didn't she, speak out? This is totally common for wives who know to not speak out. And I have, my mother, but I don't know for sure. She died. My stepmother, my mother-in-law, other women that I know that don't speak out. Like it's not unusual. The unusual thing is a mother who speaks out.
Really?
Yes.
You were going to read something else?
Yes. This is just, you were asking about the wedding. So the story begins, strangely enough, with a wedding. As is often the case with incest, it had gone on for years, but the unraveling began when my family gathered for my younger sister's marriage. Even before the bride began to plan the nuptials, family members muttered, mumbled, and tried to think happier thoughts. We knew it needed to come out. I like to call it the constipated memory syndrome. 3 months before the wedding, my brother, I'll just omit his name, had decided to have his daughter christened. He suggested, since we might all be in the same city, we could gather to discuss incest. The time had come. Furtive and terrified, we freaked. We couldn't do this now. We had a wedding to plan. Besides, what would the groom's mother think? On the previous Christmas, the avalanche had already started. When my brother, another brother, dropped by for a visit, we had this strained conversation. Well, so-and-so has finally left home. He was still doing it to her. Did you know? I'm not surprised. He did it to me for a long time. He did it to you? How come you never told me? You never asked. I hoped he had stopped. We are so dumb. Who else? Who knows? What's going to happen now? What can we do? It's going to be shitty no matter what. And then I felt a sinking feeling like flunking a test, blowing an interview, only 100,000 times worse. Let's wait and see. Maybe it will work out. Maybe we won't have to do anything. But we had come to a ledge, whether we liked it or not. And then we stepped off the cliff.
So I guess I didn't realize you had brothers as well. Were they abused?
Yes. Not that any of them have admitted, but there's been indicators.
Did they support you and your
one brother
allegations?
yes. One brother, yes. The other brothers, not really. No, they were afraid of my father.
So they may have been physically abused, if not sexually abused.
Yes, as we all were, but they were. Yes.
So one of the things that the psychologists say is that often the abuse goes generation by generation. It's not genetic, but it's sort of socialized. Do you think that that's a case in your family history?
Yes. after my father was convicted, I wasn't told directly, but people that still had contact with him said after he was convicted, he started talking about how his brother, he came from a family of 12, how his older brothers had abused him.
You know, it's got to stop sometime. And
that's why I wrote the book, because that's the thing. It's like to shift the blame from, because it's so taboo to talk about it. Like I had tons of therapy. I went to support groups. I, like did all kinds of body work and healing and stuff. It's insane how hard it was to get to the point where I could talk to people about it without breaking down, crying, having these weird experiences.
I think you've done a service to your family and to society by talking about it, because I think it does need to stop. And I think if we keep hiding it, it'll never stop. And so I thank you for the book. I thank you for the allegations that you made that obviously resulted in a conviction. And thank you for coming on the show and talking about this difficult topic. If people want to read the book, remind us the title and where they can get it.
It's called The Unraveling: Incest and the Destruction of a Family. I'm not sure what bookstores it might be in, but it's published by the University of Regina Press, and they're selling it. So you can go to the website and
Donna Besel, thank you so much for joining us and talking about this topic. I really appreciate it, and thank you for reading some excerpts from the book. I commend you.
Well, I thank you, and I hope this all made sense, because it sounds like you're interested, but I'm telling you things you didn't know. So, yeah, I'm glad we had this conversation.
I'm glad too, and I think that the listeners will be as well. I remind you, everybody, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. I bring you interesting authors and hopefully interesting discussions with lots of different people on a fairly regular basis. All of my podcasts and videos go up on my website, briancrombie.com, and up on social media, YouTube, and podcast servers as soon as the radio show goes to air. Donna, it's a difficult topic, but thank you for writing it, and thank you for coming on the show.
And thank you for asking me. Thanks.
That's it. Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining us.